Yes, it's real. An actual official flip phone remake of the first Resident Evil game. I wanted to cover it as part of my last video, where I talk about all the other Resident Evil button phone games, but the idea of an official remake that looks like this was so interesting to me that I decided to give it its own video and properly compare it to the original, which I, of course, replayed for this. And then I played the remake, and realized that some of its elements are actually inspired by the remake. So I did what anyone with a full-time job, 2 YouTube channels, a Twitch stream, a voluntary 3D modeling gig, chores, hopefully some kind of private life, and a recent stay at the hospital, which is why it took so long to come out, would do. I played through the remake too. So I hope I am now prepared to tackle this. I am Jen, and this is Resident Evil Genesis. Upon starting it, we get a text explaining the backstory, saying that bizarre murder cases have been reported and that victims were apparently eaten. I don't know, that last sentence is always kind of funny to me, even in the originals. But of course we also get to read how our guys ended up in the mansion, which is the same as in the original, just without a cutscene, and without Chris. Here it's only Jill. We then see all the 69s on the floor, Barry explains the controls to us in this super immersive, in-universe way, and we're free to explore the mansion, tank controls and all. But something's different. What is this statue doing here? Where are the iconic stairs? And why does this room have such a weird shape? And these kinds of questions can be asked for the entire mansion. The layout is completely different here. For example, the kitchen isn't in the basement, it's right next to the main hall, and we can't access the second floor until much later. And these are only some of the many differences here, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. As I already mentioned, this game also has tank controls, except you can't go backwards or run for some reason. So instead, you walk around, explore, find items, solve puzzles, the whole package. It really is an actual survival horror game on this very limited platform, which I find super interesting. And it's also a very different one from Confidential Report, which I talked about in my last video. And on top of that, many of the puzzles are completely different from the original games too. Like this one, where you have to figure out the passcode to this door that leads to the second floor, but you need to read a specific note and look at the painting to do so, or leave the painting out and know your Resident Evil lore, but you... And the remaining ones, the ones that are similar to the original, are only inspired by it, but adapt them in different ways. Like for example, killing the giant plant isn't done by spraying its roots anymore, instead you have to put liquid into the tanks that keep it alive. Some of the puzzles can also get pretty ridiculous, like how you have to smash the glass of this cabinet with an item, but you end up knocking the thing you need into a crevice in the wood and have to get it out with another item? That's one way to do it, I guess. And while of course some items are in obvious locations like this cabinet, a lot of them can also be anywhere. Literally. Plants, the piano chair, individual cabinets in this giant kitchen, anywhere. Which means you also have to check out every little thing in all the rooms, which honestly can get a little tedious, especially in the greenhouse and the library, and especially with the tank controls. So you have to rotate, walk to the next thing, rotate towards it, try it out, rotate away, go to the next thing, and so on. But at least you have an unlimited inventory. Imagine also having to go to an item box all the time. And of course there are also notes. Those are never hidden like items, they're always visible in the rooms, and they can get super interesting, not only adding to this game's original lore, which, yes, exists, but sometimes also containing clues to puzzles, like this poem, or reference things that remind me of the originals. We even get a report from William Birkin, whose initials are in one letter in the remake, but who was actually only introduced in Resident Evil 2. And Lisa Trevor's diary is also here. She only appears in the remake and is easily the most tragic character in the entire franchise. Please look her up if you don't know about her. But of course this wouldn't be a Resident Evil game without some zombies. In the original and remake, your first encounter with one is incredibly iconic, but here you can run into your first one in 3 different locations, because this game is just that open. In a way, it genuinely makes the originals feel linear in comparison, at least in the mansion. You can go pretty much anywhere you want right away, and your first zombie encounter can either be in the kitchen, in the dining hall, which was my first encounter, and holy shit was I overwhelmed trying to figure out the controls, or in the living room? To which Barry then also comes and comments on the whole thing. So I guess this was meant to be the first encounter, but it's kind of funny if you go here last, which I did, after already killing a bunch, and only now does Barry also notice. The zombies are pretty fast in this game, and whenever you enter a room with one, Jill will automatically run instead of walking. Would have liked to do it at all times. You shoot them by putting the crosshair in their position, or waiting until they walk into it on their own, and firing when the bar reaches the red area. Don't do it when it's full, or it won't work. That actually confused me at first. But if you do it properly, you can one-shot any normal zombie. It's really not hard at all, but being surrounded by 4 of them without knowing how to fight them was pretty overwhelming. Also, interestingly, your crosshair doesn't follow the tank controls. It just goes up, down, left or right the way you press the buttons, which makes sense, but didn't help my confusion with that first fight. Killed zombies always leave a blood puddle for the rest of the game, similar to the remake where it's either the headless body or a burn mark. I always love these kinds of permanent changes to the environment. You know, in a way showing your progress but also changing things up a little. It's not always clean, you kill zombies, and you're always reminded of that in a way that, while always similar, is still unique to your specific playthrough. I like that. Other enemies include the ones you see in the original games too. Dogs, which always one-shot you here, no matter how much health you have. Crimsonhead zombies, which were only introduced in the remake and can actually run. Hunters, which are of course harder to kill. And all the bosses. Except arguably the most iconic one, the snake. But only the tyrant works the same as in the originals. You just kinda have to blast it with ammo while it runs after you. Hardest fight in the game, by the way, that thing is fast. The other bosses are, as many other things here, only inspired by the originals. The little shop of horrors plant I mentioned earlier creates these vines that block off paths, probably inspired by this bit from the original games, but works very differently here, as they don't attack you, but literally just block a bunch of paths until you kill the main body. You do that by using 2 different items on these tanks that keep it alive and feed it. So it's still an active experiment in this game, and it's in a greenhouse. It's not a random plant in the middle of a giant empty room in a dorm next to the mansion where you spray poison on its exposed roots to kill it. It actually makes sense here. I love that. And by the way, the dorm isn't a thing in this game at all. Here it's the second floor of the mansion that kinda replaces it, I guess. Contrary to the original, and especially the remake, you never even step out of the mansion at all until you enter the cave through the basement. And the cave is much smaller here, to the point where neither the spider boss nor Lisa Trevor are even in there. Lisa was turned into a stalker enemy for a short section of the game, and the spider is in the attic of the mansion, which, by the way, like Lisa, wasn't a thing in the original either. The entire mansion only had 2 floors there, so the existence of the attic is also inspired by the remake. The spider here looks super cool, by the way. In the originals it was a typical boss fight, as you can see, you run around and shoot it, but in Genesis it's stationary and you have to reach it while it fires at you, and only then can you shoot it. And the shark, well, it's chilling in a pool in the basement, which you can't cross unless you electrocute it. Which I guess is inspired by the remake too, but it's only the way you kill it. The rest is very different. And while there is sadly no Jill sandwich in this game, her comments after killing the plant and the shark honestly kinda make up for it. It really feels like they stuffed all the concepts from the original games into the first location here, the mansion. That makes it much more condensed and takes away a lot of the suspense, because you already know that you can expect some kind of action in every room. But that also always made me curious about what's next, more so than in many other survival horror games. It's a super different experience, which I appreciated. But when I say that they stuffed all the concepts from the originals into the mansion, I really mean it. The cave section is incredibly short. I got through it in less than 7 minutes, compared to the total runtime of around 2.5 hours. And the only real similarity here is that we also meet Enrico, who tries to tell us something but is shot before he's able to. And instead of ammo, he now has a note that straight up outs Wesker as the bad guy, something that was pretty obvious already because he's been acting way more suspicious here than in the originals. So there is no real plot twist here, and not even an attempt at one. No real betrayal, and no time for one either, as that's already where the game basically ends. The only unexplored area at this point is the lab, a single room connected to the caves, and of course it's the final one, where the tyrant kills Wesker and becomes the final boss. And after killing it, everything explodes and we get the final text. No countdown or escape sequence or anything, it just ends. I don't even know where the helicopter supposedly landed if everything outside is too dangerous and there is no helipad, but it's too late for such questions. It's over. That was Resident Evil Genesis. As you hopefully noticed, this game roughly follows the same structure as the originals, but really does its own thing. That also applies to the story. There are entire subplots that are completely original here, like Barry telling you that the first zombie had a radio with which he wants to contact the helicopter, but it's missing batteries, so we have to find them. Meanwhile, Jill somehow doesn't realize that zombies used to be humans? She then gets chased by Lisa Trevor, who in the remake only appeared in the cave, and meets Wesker, who was apparently looking around outside, even though they're only inside because it's too dangerous out there. And that's only one of the things that make him much more suspicious here than he ever was in the originals. He also talks to Barry about some kind of mission that doesn't concern Jill, which he also does in the remake, but we don't know it's him, and he doesn't know we're behind that door. Here he just does it in front of her. And he also mysteriously has a key to one of the locked doors. So no guessing here, he is the bad guy, period. Whereas in the originals, he isn't really that suspicious until much later. We don't even meet him until the end of the game, except in one of the 2 remake campaigns, where we also see him after killing the plant. The notes also change things up. They talk about the underground lab almost immediately, while in the originals it was a much more gradual reveal. And other notes talk about things that are very specific to this game, like this one, where an infected person was being silenced by the man in the sunglasses, who cut off one of their thumbs and put it in the freezer. That never happened in the originals, and is yet another new subplot, and yet another thing that makes Wesker even more suspicious. So as I already said, it's not just that there are new items, a new layout, and new puzzles. No, the entire story and everything related to it, the entire game, is different. This is not just a demake of the original or of the remake. This is an entirely new adaptation of the same basic outline that, by the way, also omits increments. You can save any time here. It really is, like the wiki says, a reimagination of Resident Evil. And I love that. A familiar but also interestingly refreshing experience that kept impressing me with how much it managed to take from its inspirations while still staying pretty original and unpredictable. When I saw the Crimson Head zombies and Lisa Trevor, I thought this game might be based on the remake more than the original, so I replayed that one too, to have a better comparison. But it really isn't. It takes inspiration from it, with things like the attic, enemies, and some of the story elements. But for the most part, comparing Genesis to the original might even make more sense in hindsight. Genesis is much shorter and removes some things, like the snake and some locations, while the remake adds a lot of stuff, especially outdoors areas like the forest, making the entire game much longer and thereby less similar to Genesis. It took me about as much longer to beat the remake compared to the original as it took me to beat Genesis in its entirety, and most of that extra time was spent in areas that simply don't exist in Genesis. So the shorter runtime, areas you visit, and overall story make this one feel closer to the original. It's really only a few details it draws from the remake. But even so, I would still overall say that it's pretty far removed from the original too, much further than the remake is. Contrary to what I, and maybe also you, expected going into it, this isn't just an isometric version of the same game. It's something else. An entirely different and more condensed way to experience the story that will remind you of the originals, but still have its own identity with original story beats, changed up environments and boss fights, and a more current feeling. It feels like the outbreak is still going on here, while in the originals everything in and around the mansion has been dead for a while. Genesis is not amazing. I might not replay it anytime soon. Maybe I'll never replay it. But it's not bad either. And for the time being, it was a super interesting experience that I'm glad I was able to make and share with you. But there is more. Resident Evil 2 also got a similar adaptation called Resident Evil Uprising. It only came out a year later, but already for smartphones. Will I also give it its own video? Probably, eventually. I'm planning to talk about all the Resident Evil smartphone games anyway, so might as well do it like the button phone games and give Uprising its own video. But for now, I'd like to focus on another project. Maybe some shorter videos like this one will come before it, but my next big one will cover the entire history of a long-running horror movie franchise. Subscribe to not miss it. And check out my other videos, like the one where I talk about all the other Resident Evil button phone games, including Confidential Report, a series of completely original, turn-based survival horror games with new characters set in Raccoon City. But until then, thank you so much for watching, have a wonderful day, or night, or whatever, and goodbye.